Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
This episode of Chilling Tales for Dark Nights is brought to you by Dipsia. Hear ye, fellow romance fanatics. I know you've been busy at work. I know the kids are dragging you all over the place, always want attention and food and all that. But is that all that life is about? Where's the adventure? The romance? You know what I'm talking about. Dipsia is a nifty app that feeds you bite-sized, captivating romance stories to keep those romantic juices flowing. Anytime you get a few moments to yourself, you can dip in and get your fix. On your commute, your lunch break, the bleachers at the Little League game. With Dipsia, you can pull out your phone, pop in your earbuds, and get your fix. For listeners of the show, Dipsia is offering an extended 30-day free trial when you go to dipsiastories.com/chilling. That's 30 days of full access for free when you go to dipsiastories.com/chilling. dipsiastories.com/chilling.
It's time to turn off the lights and turn on the dark.
Chilling tales for dark nights.
Good evening, fellow denizens of the dark. You're listening to Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. Tonight's episode takes us deep into stories of guilt, survival, and the most monstrous consequences of our own making. In 2 chilling tales, we'll explore the dark corners of regret and the haunting reality of hell itself. I'm your host, Geoff Sturtevant, and tonight, I'll be your guide through the dimly lit corridors of your darkest dreams. Before we begin, remember that you can show your support by giving us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening. If you're joining us on YouTube, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and hit that subscribe button and bell icon to stay updated on all our new releases. And for those who want more, visit chillingtalesfordarknights.com to become a patron and enjoy our content ad-free. Your support means the world to us. Really. Thank you. Joining me tonight is a voice many of you already know well. Jay, of Horror on the Rocks. Jay's work has thrilled fans of horror narration with his immersive audio designs and spine-chilling performances.
Thanks, Jeff. It's great to be here.
It's great here, isn't it? They're always playing this creepy music in the background. Anyway, for those who might not know you yet, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm Jay, a narrator who occasionally does some voice acting, and I'm best known for my YouTube channel, Horror on the Rocks, which is also available in podcast format anywhere that you get your podcasts. You might recognize me as the creator of the I Inherited a Mortuary series, which just started season 3. But before narrating stories about morticians and succubi, I was just a kid from a small town in the Northwest who found his way in the military. After my service, I discovered the world of horror podcasts and creepypastas, which has become a genre that has since become my passion. As for when I'm not narrating, I work as a therapist full-time. I also love playing RPGs and spending time with my family. And so with that, thank you for having me, Jeff, and I just want to finish by saying to the listeners to remember, to listen responsibly.
That's a great motto. We're so glad to have you join us tonight, Jay. And listeners, here's something exciting. Jay of Horror on the Rocks will also be narrating Chilling Tales creator Craig Groshek's original story, The Goodness Room, premiering tomorrow, Thursday, January 9th, on his YouTube channel. It's a haunting story you won't want to miss.
I think it's going to be awesome. The Goodness Room is one of Craig's most unsettling tales. It's a gripping story about a small town school with a terrifying secret. A room where discipline takes an entirely new meaning.
Be sure to tune in tomorrow on Jay's Horror on the Rocks channel and let him know we sent you. Now, let's dive into tonight's featured stories. Our first tale tonight comes from A.K. Kullerden, and it's a chilling exploration of guilt, regret, and the inescapable consequences of one man's actions. Here's Jay of Horror on the Rocks with I'm starting to regret killing my girlfriend.
3 weeks ago, I killed my girlfriend, Melanie Palmer. Chopped her body into 11 pieces and buried them in scattered, discreet locations around my state. This isn't a confession. Well, I guess it is. But that's not the driving force behind this admission. I don't expect any empathy or any guidance. I don't even expect anyone to take this seriously. Me, all the prerequisites have been said, though I suppose it wouldn't hurt to give you a rundown. I'm not what you'd call striking, though I've always made it a point to blend and flow with society. To delicately veneer my true nature with a cordial persona, however contrived. Maybe we've met before. Probably not. If we have, good luck pegging a name on me. Or, for that matter, finding me at all. Melanie wasn't my first victim. It's just that all the others were animals from all different clades. Fish, birds, mammals, reptiles. It's fascinating how each organism reacts in their own way. You see, our brains contained mirror neurons. They're responsible for the pity you feel when a wounded dog comes whimpering by your heel, and for the lack of it when a creature expresses pain in a manner that you're unused to. Honestly, it's fucking shallow, but it's the human condition. Except, I'm human, and I'd like to say I'm past all that sickly sweet bullshit. And let's be honest, feelings are a hindrance more than not. So the trustworthy thing to do is observe. I mentioned dogs already. They always end up being a right mess. Screaming and writhing, contorting their limbs as if the thumbtacks in their eyes are gonna kill them. The idea of having kids has always been off-putting to me. Dealing with an indignant mutt is just as tedious. Chickens fuss a bit, then sort of freeze up once they realize flight isn't an option. Pun intended. The first few times it's funny, but it gets old. I could go on. If it makes you feel any better, call me a coward. Take all the jabs you want. The fact is that I haven't killed people. Well, until now. Just offers a cheap avenue for insult. Even when the rational part of your brain is relieved, I stuck to animals. There's no tangible strings of influence that I have over anything anymore. So if nothing else, be sincere. Mourn the dead. And for your information, I say this not out of empathy. Nothing bores me more than loafing around. Don't stew in resentment. Get on with your damn lives. Okay. Now that all that is clear, I can get into why I'm even writing this. 5 days went by without a hitch, and that's when I started seeing it. Nothing intrusive at first. I'd spy a figure in the distance, swaying gently as needs shimmered in the wind. The first time, it was nothing but a fleeting curiosity. The second time, however, it lodged inside my brain like thorns in a boot sole. An old man told me once, "A house can be haunted, but so can we." I know he was referring to memories, trauma, regret, but I don't carry those burdens. Maybe the universe sought to level the playing field, I don't know. I see the figure everywhere now, half obscured at the end of a grocery store aisle, standing on an overpass while I'm driving along the highway. Sometimes in places that make no sense, physically speaking, like behind the stove extractor fan, small as if distant, yet contained in such a tiny space. By itself. Not so scary, of course. I wouldn't be here if things didn't worsen. When I stare at the thing, my head starts to pound. A static thrumming in my ears. Feels like everything else starts to crumble away. Except the figure. It grows clearer the longer I gaze into its rippling silhouette. Let me tell you, nothing scares me. Not really. As long as I still have my agency. But whenever I notice it, swaying against the ashen sky, it's as if something outside of myself is sticking toothpicks between my eyelids, leather straps around my limbs, holding me in place only to stare at the loose segments rippling with the haze of a mirage and swaying of kelp. The more I watch, and the less my thoughts wander, it approaches. I never see it moving, but it gets closer, sharper. A few days ago, it got close enough for me to truly make out its body. I was correct about it being in segments, but only now could I count them. 11. 11 ragged pieces strung by glistening sinew and entrails. It'd be so easy to say that she'd come back to me, from the grave and all of that. Yet somehow I can tell that that's only half truth. Because when Melanie was close enough to fix me with her murky eyes, I noticed the thing behind her. Taut, gray skin, mottled by mangy tufts of hair. Those are the only consistently visible features. I can't help but feel she's picked up an errant companion somewhere between death and, well, whatever's after, if anything. Or maybe it found her. Either way, it's here now and I'm powerless to fight back. It can't be some form of post-mortem vengeance. Otherwise, why would it drive its blackened and chipped nails up into Melanie's exposed organs, twisting gargled screams out of her like some macabre conductor? Why would it coil and squeeze its phlegmy, splitting tongues through her nose and ears and mouth? All the while it fixes me with a glare through the gap of her neck. Flat, shark-like eyes somehow conveying a perversion so fast past my own it sickens me. I really don't know what it wants. For me, it feels like all those little animals did. Possibly. Although that feels a bit facile when I see and look in its eyes. I realized it wasn't Melanie herself wavering in the air after I saw the thing's torn and ancient rags drifting lazily around her sides, as though underwater. From where the world faded, slowly, things just vanished. Number 17 across the street was replaced by monotone ground. A lumpy rock plain. And so it went for everything else. The looming forest hills to the east, gone. The main road leading out of town, gone. The entire industrial estate a couple of streets over. You get the picture. Just barren stone in place of what once was. The fear stagnant at first, then bubbled up with a needling ferocity. It started to become too much. My van was gone, and I dared not leave the confines of my home. Though at this point it was more of a prison than a sort of comfortable retreat. I caught a few mice in the pantry and made some crosses out of popsicle sticks. Crucified them. Got bored waiting for them to croak. So I ended up dunking them in a pot of boiling water till they stopped moving. In the past, something like that would have evened me out. But now, those lifeless eyes bore into the back of my neck whenever I look away. The feeling is inescapable. The sound of its wet, guttural rumbling is insufferable. I wish that I'd just get it over with. Tear my eyes out. Hang me for my own intestines, I don't care. Everything else is gone now, other than my house. The windows offer a view out across an indeterminable plain. The sky is filled with dull clouds so that the horizon is practically invisible, blending seamlessly with stone. Shit. I just looked up from my laptop and even the house is gone. All at the mercy of this fucking thing that won't even show itself to me. Hiding behind my greatest sin, clacking teeth and all. Bony mantis limbs unfolding, eyes reflecting the deepest, coldest ocean. The depth of their cruelty is immeasurable. It's standing right in front of me, still holding up the mangled body shield of Melanie, still flaying her skin and unsheathing her bone. I'd actually respect the monster's depravity if I weren't its prisoner. As I record this, I can see its drumming fingers in the corner of my eye. Is it impatient? Why is it even letting me type? I think it wants me to cast out my message in a bottle so it can be lost to the waves. I know no one will ever read it. Though if anyone does, I doubt they'd spare any empathy to seek me out. To that I say, fair enough. I'm a lot of things, but a hypocrite I am not. Haven't felt hungry in a while, or thirsty. I don't even feel tired, and I've been awake for what, a week? Maybe 2? I resigned to this fate, so I tried smashing my head into the ground over and over, desperate to end this nightmare. All it's done is given me a splitting headache, but not a drop of blood. It is laughing now. That's all I can equate its hacking rasps to. I can smell its breath polluting the air. Old blood and scorched bone with the heat to match. Melanie's screaming too, with whatever's left of her vocal cord. The disgusting sympathy rattles inside my skull. It's the worst sound that I've ever heard. I just looked up again and it's gone. Melanie's still there. Weightless, though her eyes are that of the monster's. Sunless discs excluding venom, slicked malice so heavily it's palpable. I lost my router connection a while back, but had enough sense to make a SIM out of my phone and put it in a laptop. Mobile data still works, though I don't understand the logic dictating that. Fuck. I hope this isn't eternity. My mind's already broken once, but something fixed it up good as new, just to be crushed by the torment once more. The screeching, it's so loud. Maniacal cackles, torturing wails. They already sound the same to me. It's not fair. What other psychotic piece of shit like me has been sentenced to something like this? People whose boundless savagery makes me look like a law-abiding citizen, where all they got were life or death sentences. It isn't fair. My body's frozen stiff. From terror or some unseen force. It's impossible to tell. I can feel the moist waves of its stinking breath on my neck. Stop it. Please. It isn't fair. Is that what she thinks? I can't... What? I didn't write that. I want to click post right now. It's just fucking ironic. In these last moments I'll ever have a connection to anyone anywhere else, the words are lost on me. Say, Melanie, what do you think? The way its fingers unfold in my peripheral, like a massive spider uncurling its legs, my spine's itching. She thinks you've said enough. My thoughts exactly. Why? Why are you tainting my last words? It's not fair. This isn't fair. No, but it is. Now you can be with her. Never again lonely. Fingers creeping across my eyes, peeling dry skin. It crackles and crunches by my ear, one extending with so many joints. So many. So loud, like gunfire. Ears hurt. Look. She's waiting for you. Melanie hangs festering before me. Her legs sway limply, toes grazing smooth stone. I never thought a sight could make a person so nauseous. Go fall into her arms and drown with her. Drown in the sweet song of your sin for all of time. Her arms, in pieces, broken, violated. I only meant to. Come on now. Well, what else is there to do? I have to go. She's waiting in some form or another. To my friends and... No. It doesn't matter. Each and every one of us will be forgotten, given time. God knows, I've been given more than enough of that.
This episode of Chilling Tales for Dark Nights is brought to you by Dipsia. Ladies, we understand your plight. You're insatiable, and we love you for it. So do our friends at Dipsia. They've got an app with over 1,000 bite-sized tales of forbidden love. Probably some unforbidden love too. But love. Lots of it. And it doesn't take long to get to the good parts. Dipsia is a female-founded romance app, jam-packed with spicy audiobooks and more. If you've read 50 Shades of Grey, Beach Read, or The Spanish Love Deception, you've come to the right place. Contemporary, historical, Western, Scottish sailors, rugged cowboys, sexy podcast hosts. They've got it all. Sure, this is a female-focused endeavor, but let me tell you something about myself. I used to swipe the romance novels from the clubhouse at my grandmother's community center when I was a kid. I'd pull them out and read them after Grandma went to bed, which was at like 5 p.m. incidentally, right after the Early Bird Special and Wheel of Fortune. I couldn't wait to curl up in bed and learn new vocabulary words like throbbing and member. I mean, I knew Grandma was a member of the community center, but this was all new to me. In any case, if you're over 18, get on Dipsia.com and enjoy over 1,000 sexy tales today. Not necessarily all today, but you get the idea. In fact, there are new chapters added all the time. You'll never run out of new thrills. For listeners of the show, Dipsia is offering an extended 30-day free trial when you go to dipsiastories.com/chilling. That's 30 days of full access for free when you go to dipseastories.com/chilling. That's dipseastories.com/chilling. Thanks for your support and for supporting our valuable sponsors. That was I'm Starting to Regret Killing My Girlfriend by A.K. Kullerden, as performed by tonight's guest, Jay of Horror on the Rocks.
Thanks, Geoff. The way that this story blends psychological horror with supernatural retribution is absolutely masterful. It really makes you think about the weight of guilt and how it can shape or destroy us.
Absolutely. And speaking of stories that stay with you, let's remind listeners about The Goodness Room, premiering tomorrow on Jay's Horror on the Rocks channel.
The Goodness Room is an unsettling blend of folklore, psychological tension, and creeping dread. It's one of those stories that will make you question what's real and what might be hiding in plain sight.
Mark your calendars right now. That's Thursday, January 9th, and make sure to subscribe to Horror on the Rocks on YouTube. Now, let's move on to our second tale of the evening.
Our next story, written by David Crabtree, takes us into the literal depths of hell. It's a brutal survival guide for the damned, a chilling, visceral look at what it takes to endure the unendurable. And without further ado, I personally present to you How to Survive in Hell. I woke up in a birthing sack, panicked and choking on amniotic fluid. I clawed at the fleshy walls, fighting with all my terrified strength to free myself. With a wet, ripping sound, I was dumped onto the muddy cobbles of the street below, twisting my ankle as I landed. Cold rain blasted my naked body clean of the sack's liquid. I tried and failed to get to my feet. The street was alien to me. An insane medley of architecture ranging from the modern to the prehistoric. The sky above me boiled with storm clouds, illuminating my surroundings with non-stop flashes of lightning. A man walked over to me. His hair was matted with filth and the rain streaked down his mismatched leather clothes. He said nothing, just watched me squirm on the floor. "Please," I gasped. "Help me." He answered by slamming a foot down on my face, breaking my jaw and making my vision real. He moved on to my limbs, stamping and tugging until he heard the bones snap. Crippled, naked, and screaming, there was nothing I could do to defend myself, as he started to eat me alive. My introduction to hell wasn't unusual. Very few people survive their first hour, let alone their first night. When they die, they go through the same thing again, emerging from a new birthing sac in another part of the city. Eventually, they learn to attack the first person that they see, and if they're lucky, they'll be able to kill that person. That's the one rule of hell. The strong take from the weak. Get used to the idea and you might just make it through the afterlife. I'm going to give you a helping hand. Consider this your handbook to hell. A primer on the inferno. Make no mistake though, I'm not doing this out of the goodness of my heart. When you die, you'll owe me one. Don't worry about trying to find me. I guarantee that we'll run into each other eventually. Eternity is a long fucking time. So it's a matter of when, rather than if. Do as I tell you, and you'll have a better chance than most of avoiding my own nasty introduction to the pit. Welcome to hell. Some people swear they saw a light at the end of the tunnel when they died. To my mind, those people either hallucinated or they're lying. Most of us just wake up in a birthing sac a few minutes after death. The buildings of hell are covered in things. Horrible, yellow-brown pimples growing out of the brick. I've already mentioned that the first thing that you do is claw your way out and get ready to fight. This is where the real bitch of the situation comes into play, since not everyone has the strength to break through their sack's flesh. You get the body that you had just before you died, see? So, let's just say that you were born a cripple, or maybe you died too young or too old. Well, tough shit. You're going to have a rough eternity drowning in birthing fluid over and over. If you manage to break free of your sack, don't waste time moping around, wondering what the fuck happened. Get on your feet and get ready to defend yourself. Chances are good that the first person who sees you will be hungry. There are no plants or animals in hell, so cannibalism is your only option if you don't fancy starving to death and having to start over. Aim to kill the first person that you see. It might take a few tries. Most of Hell's residents have been fighting for survival a lot longer than you. They might have armor made from tanned skin, scavenged metal, and bone. They'll almost certainly have a shiv, club, or an axe. All of that will be useful to you if you take it from them. The next thing to do is find shelter. It never stops raining in Hell, and pneumonia is a shitty way to die. Luckily, you'll have a selection of buildings to choose from. Ever wanted to live in a rundown Victorian manor with half a roof and no furniture? How about an ancient Egyptian mud brick hovel? If people have built it, you can find a crumbling version of it in Hell. Pick a building, kill any squatters you find, and move in. The best houses are the ones that come with a supply of scrap metal and timber. Not only are those good for making weapons with, they're also vital for getting drinkable water. I learned the hard way that Hell's rain is teeming with disease. It has to be boiled before it's safe. So getting a fire going and something to make a bowl with is a necessity. So, we've killed your first man and found a home. Things are going well. Get that far and you're going to want to hang on to whatever it is that you have forever. But you won't. Something will kill you eventually and you'll have to start over. My record is a year. If you want to beat that, you'll need to understand Hell, as well as its denizens, the damned. The people of Hell can be grouped into two categories. The first, the fresh meat, are those who've just climbed out of their birthing sack. It's kill or be killed when it comes to fresh meat. Always has been. The newly birthed want clothing and tools and will kill you to get a hold of them. The second category, the residents, view fresh meat as a quick and easy supply of food, leather and bone. Residents have an easier time of it for sure, and all of them will fight to retain their resident status for as long as they can. Make no mistake though, residents victimize each other just as much as they prey on the fresh meat. If you're a woman, for instance, well, you better get used to any hang-ups that you have about rape. Women get raped in Hell far more than men. It's just a fact. If you're one of those bodybuilders or warrior women, do the smart thing and prostitute yourself for protection. Self-respect doesn't keep you breathing. Remember how you get the body that you had just before you died? Well, that fact forms the core of Hell's society. The truth of the matter is that throughout history, it's usually been men who die in battle. That means in Hell, there are a lot of men with young, strong, fit bodies for war. Don't like it? Tough. Those are the guys who call the shots. If you can't fight them, you better do as they say. If you live long enough to fight well enough, you might get invited into one of the resident tribes. These are groups of people who have banded together for the sake of safety and numbers. Believe me, being part of a group makes things a lot easier in Hell. However, keep in mind that you're only part of the tribe for as long as you're a resident. Get yourself killed and it's back to being fresh meat. Tribes offer the closest thing to civilized society that you'll find in Hell. If you're part of a tribe, you have people on your side who probably won't kill you unless shit gets rough. It doesn't sound like much, but that's as good as it gets. My own survival record was thanks to getting into a tribe. Life was good for a while there. We had about 50 soldiers and plenty of girls to fuck. Nobody could touch us, and the men abided by an honor code, so the usual fear of being stabbed in the back by your friends wasn't too much of an issue. I could have spent my eternity in reasonable comfort, but hell has many ways of fucking over a good thing. Human flesh and boiled rainwater doesn't exactly make for a balanced diet, and sooner or later, even the strongest residents die of malnutrition. I did well to last a year on it, though the last few months were agony. If I believed in God, I'd swear he designed hell in such a way that nobody stays on top of the food chain for very long. The city and the wasteland. Most of the damned live in Dis, the city of hell. That's where all the fresh meat is born, and consider the size of the place coupled with the short life expectancy. A lot of people will spend eternity without ever having set foot outside of Dis. Take my advice. Do not leave the city. Things are rough on the streets, and that's true. But trust me when I say it gets a whole lot worse if you try to leave. Dis is surrounded by a wasteland called Gehenna. At first glance, it doesn't look like much, just an empty expanse of gray stretching out into infinity. Sometimes the damned lose that fire in their belly, the will to survive, and set off wandering into Gehenna. Most of them never come back. I made the walk myself once, a long time ago. I don't care how hard you think you are. Spend enough time in hell and it starts to break you down. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm a good person for whoever deserves this. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm a good person who never deserved this. Nobody can say that and not be a liar. I'm not evil though. Or rather, I wasn't. Not until I got to hell. You murder, rape, and torture because you know they will do the same thing to you. You're murdered, raped, and tortured because they know you'll do the same thing to them. Give it long enough and you just don't want to face it anymore. That's when you take the walk into Gehenna. The first couple of miles I walked were nothing special. The rain stopped after a while, and the sludge beneath my feet giving way to gray ash, and I caught my first glimpse of hell's sky beyond the clouds. It was a flat gray with a white sun, completely devoid of beauty or warmth. But I trudged on. While walking through Gehenna, I lost any urge to eat, drink, or sleep. My body started to waste away, but I didn't care. Even when my skin started to peel away and my bones were exposed, I still didn't care. The further I walked, the hollower I became in mind, body, and soul. I don't know what would have happened if I'd kept going. Frankly, I don't want to know. Some part of me still wanted to live, so I turned back. I'd walked for days, maybe weeks. Yet when I turned around, Dis was only a few steps away. I stepped back into the city and my body finally fell apart. When I emerged from my birthing sack, I swore never to step foot into Gehenna again. Escaping from hell. There are ways to leave hell. That should be obvious. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking to you, would I? Sometimes the living get it into their heads that they want to talk with the dead. They get their crystals, incense, and spirit boards in the hopes of reaching their loved ones. Most do nothing more than trick themselves into thinking that they've made contact. They smile or cry, convinced that their beloved granny is playing the harp on a cloud somewhere before getting on with their lives. A few have the skill to actually reach us, though. They can open a gate between hell and the world of the living that we perceive as a pillar of fire stretching down from the clouds. As soon as one of those pillars show up, the damned scramble to be the first to get to it. You haven't seen the true nature of man until you've watched thousands of the damned swarming over each other, kicking, biting, clawing to be the one who escapes. Contacting the dead always results in a bloodbath. Even the most civilized tribes fall apart the instant that it becomes clear that only one of them can leave. I've left hell twice now. Left my body behind and ridden that pillar of fire up into the clouds. Some people believe that you can be possessed by demons. Let me tell you something. Demons are not real. What the living sees as demonic possession is just one of the damned testing out their new body. Let's face it, if you fought your way through hell to get back to the world of the living, you're not going to be on your best behavior for very long. Sooner or later, we take things too far. Our host dies or their family cave and recruit an exorcist. Then we're fresh out of the birthing sack and on the streets again. I'm going to go on now. When you get to hell, remember my advice, and that you owe me one. Maybe one day we can form a tribe. Someday. For the time being, though, I want to see what my new body can do. By now, you should have a good idea of what you can expect from hell. You know to kill the first person you see when you fight your way out of the birthing sack. You know to find clothing and tools and shelter. You know that no matter what you will do, how well you do, someday it's back to being the fresh meat. Dis is the biggest city you can imagine. Tribes fight and die for territory, and taking a wrong turn is a fucking death sentence. You'll get a feel for where you should be going and shouldn't go eventually. Develop the kind of street smarts you need to stay a resident for more than a day. Even so, there are places in Dis that you should know about. Let's do a little sightseeing tour of hell. Maybe the advance warning will do some good for you. Skin Street. Allow me to tell you about the first time that I saw Skin Street. I dropped out of my birthing sack onto the road, stood straight back up and got myself ready to fight. But nobody was there. Not one single person was out on the street that stretched for miles in either direction. I relaxed a little and took a look around. Most of the streets in Dis are a labyrinth network of buildings. You spend most of your stay in hell paranoid that, just around the next corner, there's someone ready to beat you down. Skin Street isn't like that. It's a single, straight line with only the rain and the darkness to hamper visibility. I felt more vulnerable there than I felt in any parts of Dis. You ever walked into a wide, empty space and suddenly felt exposed? Yeah. Imagine also being naked, unarmed, and in hell. Still, I know what I was supposed to do. The first step was to find some clothing. And that's where I learned how Skin Street got its name. Every building, every busted streetlight and gas lamp was decorated with flayed skin. I'd been in hell long enough by that point to not be too freaked out, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't affect me. In a fucked up kind of way, it reminded me of Christmas, you know? People hanging wreaths and lights from their houses, that sort of thing. I remembered the time I'd spent with my family, with my kids on Christmas morning. Feelings like that will get you killed. I pushed them back down and pulled some scraps from the nearest building. If somebody was going to leave clothing material lying about, I may as well take it, right? I didn't know it at the time, but every step I took on Skin Street was being watched. When the attack came, I didn't even get a glimpse of the guy. My skull fractured from an expert swing of a club. Whoever hit me went for my eyes, and the second I hit the floor, stuck his fingers right into my sockets. I was blind and crying like a baby when he started to peel away my skin. Here's the thing. Some people are fucked up even by hell's standards. The loners, serial killers, stalkers, and psychopaths all make their way to Skin Street in the end. Most of the damned use the whole body of a kill, but the Skin Street people like to take trophies. They leave their ornaments out as bait for the ignorant, skulking in the shadows and watching for the best moment to ambush. If you find yourself on Skin Street, you're going to have to think fast. Forget clothing, just grab a rock, piece of wood, or anything else you can as a weapon. Stay out of the shadows. Keep checking behind you. And get out of there as quickly as you can. The Perdition Farms. You're going to be chased in hell. That's unavoidable. At some point, you'll stumble into somebody bigger than you and you'll find yourself outnumbered. Forget about a fair fight. If somebody can take you down without you fighting back, you bet that that's what they'll do. It's easy to lose focus when you're running for your life. You can forget to pay attention to your surroundings. And that, my friend, is a big mistake. The outskirts of the Perdition Farms are littered with billboards. They promise free food and safety to anybody fucking stupid enough to believe them. The tribes that fight over that particular territory like to herd people off the streets and into the industrial complex they call home. The good news is that those tribes will not kill you. The bad news is that they're big fans of taking people alive. They've got a project, you see. Been working on it for as long as I can remember. I couldn't tell you who originally decided that Hell should have organized food production, only that the idea stuck, and that over the years, countless tribes have taken it upon themselves to try and make that dream a reality. Get yourself captured by them, and you can look forward to a bit of slave labor. For the most part, the Perdition Farm tribes try to make use of the birthing pods as a resource of food. They force their slaves to harvest them from the walls, grind them up into industrial vats, mix them with blood, body parts, rainwater, and anything else that they can conceivably make a broth. The life of a slave is short, brutal, and disgusting. Particularly when those slaves are then used as guinea pigs for the latest concoction. You see, amniotic fluid can be drunk if you're desperate, though drinking too much is guaranteed to make you empty your stomach from every available orifice. The flesh of the sacs is a different matter, though. I couldn't tell you exactly what the birthing sacs are. Some people say that they're actual flesh, while others swear that they're more like a fungus. What I do know is that they repair themselves over time. Eat some of their flesh, and over the next few days, you'll grow a new birthing sac inside of you. It's a small mercy that you won't live long enough to see it break through your skin. You'll be dead shortly after your stomach bursts. If you're lucky, your days as a slave will end when the tribe decides that they want some real meat. They're not stupid enough to test their broth themselves, not when there's a shortage of slaves in Hell. Look, I can't force you to stay out of the Perdition Farms. I can only offer advice. In my opinion, if you think that you are being herded there, it's better to take whatever's to hand and cut your own throat. I'd take fresh meat status 100 times before spending another day on the farms. The boneyard. So maybe you're thinking to yourself, hey, I'm a kind of nut job who'd join a cult. Is there anything in hell for me? That sounds like you. The boneyard has you covered. You see, there's a certain kind of religious fanatic who really does belong in hell. I'm not talking about the old dears who bake cakes to raise money for the new church roof here. I'm talking about the guys who went to war because God commanded it, who burned women for supposedly consorting with demons, and who saw nothing wrong with fucking the odd kid. When those people get to hell, they're too thick-headed to make sense of what happened. Why face reality when you can pretend it's all just a test of faith? They'll find like-minded folk in the boneyard. I'm told at one point the boneyard was a cathedral surrounded by a cemetery that stretched from horizon to horizon. Maybe that's true. I don't know. These days, it's a shanty town of temples and churches built from materials scavenged from the streets. Everywhere you look, you'll find wild-eyed zealots preaching their own twisted version of redemption and gangs of masked men on the prowl for fresh converts. Mortification of the flesh is the main pastime in the boneyard. If you listen to the cacophony of sermons, you'll be informed on how the flesh is wicked and must be purged of sin. How lucky we are to be given such a holy duty. How fortunate to be given the opportunity to redeem ourselves before God. The people of the boneyard have had a long time and plenty of fucking practice when it comes to mastering torture and degradation. Now, I'm not a good person. I've killed, raped, and cannibalized, but I can honestly tell you I'd never been able to dream up some of the shit that goes on in the boneyard. I wandered in there by accident once, and I've never been able to get what I saw out of my brain. I watched a woman, naked and bound, forced onto her knees and violated with iron rods. A preacher sewed his own eyes and lips shut in front of the crowd before sawing off his manhood with a piece of slate. A boy, maybe 14, was publicly crucified, and a girl was drowned in shit. An older man had sharpened flint pushed under his fingernails. I couldn't list off 100 other atrocities done in the name of redemption. Stay away from the boneyard. The people there decide that hell just isn't hellish enough for their liking. Forget about redemption. Forget about God. The only way out of hell is by riding a pillar of fire and taking over a living body. Focus on that if you want to escape. The damned can't offer you salvation. The damned only offer pain. I have to leave you soon. If I'm to make the most out of life on Earth, I'm afraid I'm going to have to skip town. While I've had plenty to keep myself entertained, this body just isn't suitable for a run-in with the police. It's only a matter of time until some nosy neighbor thinks to pick up the phone. With the humidity over the last few days, Mummy and Daddy are already pretty ripe. Here's something you have to understand. Hell is a big place. I've given you fair warning about a few of the locations I myself have run into and that will have to do. Even if I wrote a library's worth of novels solely dedicated to mapping out the distinct locations within Dis, I still couldn't tell you everything about the city. What I can do is give you a bit of information about some of the damned. The Slaughter Man. Take a moment to think about all of the celebrities you know. How many of them do you reckon would do well in Dis? Not many, I'll wager. Perhaps none. Fame and fortune on Earth doesn't count for shit when you're dead. Very few people are strong enough, mean enough, and downright psychotic enough to earn a reputation in hell. Those few who have what it takes are people you never want to meet. The Slaughter Man is one of hell's legends. A huge, bearded man with filed teeth, bloodshot eyes, and foam on his lips. Rumor has it that the day that he first emerged from a birthing sack, he was unlucky enough to land on the feet of a slaver tribe. Well, those tribesmen chuckled to themselves and readied their clubs and whips, all too happy to take some fresh meat captive. Outnumbered 12 to 1, naked and unarmed and brand new to hell, most people wouldn't stand a chance. If you believe the stories, the Slaughter Man shrugged off the clubs battering against him and the whips cutting into his flesh as though they were just insect bites. He picked up the first slaver, put his hand into the man's mouth, and pulled his jaw right off of his skull. He moved on to another, and then another, tearing them apart with his bare hands until the survivors turned and fled. Nobody knows for sure who he was in life. I've heard theories, though, and the most popular one being that he was a berserker of Stamford Bridge. Supposedly, a single Viking held up the English army single-handed. It didn't matter that he could never win, that he was outnumbered, that his enemies had better weapons and armor. He stood on the bridge and he fought. By the time that he was brought down, he'd killed no less than 40 men. I don't know how true any of this is. I've never seen the Slaughter Man for myself, and I don't fucking want to. What I can tell you for sure is that people don't become legendary in hell without good reason. I'd guess that the only one who knows the truth is the Slaughter Man himself, and he isn't saying anything. Since the day he arrived in hell, he's only spoken once. The fleeing slavers heard it as the Slaughter Man tore their tribe apart. Naked, bloody, and surrounded by corpses, the Slaughter Man looked up to the storm-racked sky and bellowed a single word. Hellhounds. How about a little story? I wasn't new to hell. I had made myself some clothes and a wooden club, found shelter, and had a big slab of meat roasting over a campfire. The only thing I didn't have was a tribe. The area I'd been birthed in seemed slummy even for Dis. All half-collapsed hovels and mud huts. Iron was scarce, barely enough to make myself a water bowl. All in all, not a good spot for a tribe. My plan was simple enough, though. I'd have a decent meal, carve myself a shiv or two in case I lost my club, then find somewhere more or less dry to sleep. After that, I'd set off to look for a tribe. Even the mildest tribal initiations result in a few scars and a broken nose, so I wanted to be at least well rested as much as I could be. Sleep in hell is both vital and dangerous. There's an act of finding somewhere that's simultaneously sheltered, hidden, and with access to an escape route. Even then, you never get more than a few hours at a time. In hell, the slightest suspicious noise should scare the shit out of you. A low, throaty growl definitely counts as a suspicious noise. I leapt out of my impromptu nest of skins and wood, raised my club, and returned the growl with one of my own. A woman had crept into my building and was staring at me with dilated pupils. She looked to be in a bad way, skinny, naked, and covered in weeping sores. Her lips peeled back to reveal broken and jagged teeth. It took me only a second to size her up. She'd been living rough for a few days or maybe even weeks. Judging from her protruding ribs and bloated stomach, she was well on her way to dying of starvation. So, she was weak, hungry, and didn't even have a weapon. "I've already eaten," I said, relaxing a little and giving my club a few practice swings. "No sense in letting you go to waste, though." I took a step towards her and she bolted, just turned right around and scampered away into a strange animal gait. I took off after her, certain that I would outpace her. Even if there wasn't much meat on her, bones can still be useful. I chased her through a few streets, struggling to keep my footing on the muddy ground. When I finally got close enough to swing my club, she stopped dead. The suddenness of it caught me off guard and I tripped over her, losing my club as I fell. She howled in triumph, a sound that was echoed by a dozen other throats. That day, I learned two things about the Hellhounds. Those people who lose their minds and become little more than beasts after enduring centuries in hell. Firstly, they have the necessary animal cunning to hunt as a pack. Secondly, human teeth and fingernails are perfectly capable of ripping flesh from the bone. The surgeons. Modern doctors rarely thrive in hell. Academia and reliance on technology don't leave you in the best state to endure the endless violence and brutality. There are exceptions, though. The people who learned to sew their friends back together amid the machine gun fire of the Samma. Shamans, witch doctors, and holy men who endured famine and warfare. Survivalists who learned how to cauterize their own wounds in the middle of a forest. Those are some of the people who might just be strong enough to plead their trade to the damned. After all, working knowledge of basic medicine is just one of the things that's beyond a lot of the meatheads roaming Dis. Most of Hell's surgeons find a tribe as soon as they're able. Their tools might be crude, but they soon learn how to make do. Flint, slate, and shards of glass serve as their scalpels. They make thread from human hair and needles from slivers of iron. Whenever a member of the tribe has an infected sore, a surgeon will be the one to drain the pus. A tribal surgeon could well save your life, but they'll do it without any anesthetic. Then there are the freelance surgeons, the people who try to go it alone. They make themselves a uniform, the theory being that the damned will recognize them if they all look alike. It doesn't really work, but you can't expect much logic from people who've lost count of how many times they've died. For one thing, fashions change over time. I'm told that freelancers wore headdresses and bone necklaces at one point. The current trend is to mimic Venetian plague doctors by donning a beaked mask and wearing a long coat of fire-blackened skin. Freelancers are rare. Very rare, in fact. You'll see thousands of the damned for every freelance surgeon you come across. When you do come across one, be fucking careful. Firstly, surgeons don't get a free pass in hell. The damned are more likely to attack a freelancer than they are to barter their tools, clothes, and slaves in exchange for his services. You also can't be certain that if the man in the bird mask and black coat is really a surgeon, or somebody who murdered a surgeon and took his clothes. Perhaps they made the outfit themselves in order to draw the weak and wounded close. Advertising doesn't always work as intended in DIS. If the freelancer turns out to be genuine, that doesn't give you an excuse to drop your guard. Freelance surgeons aren't usually the most stable people. Put it another way, freelancers are usually sadistic fucking psychopaths. Sure, they might stitch you back together and send you on your way. They might also decide it would be more interesting if they stitch you to someone else. They might think that paying an arm and a leg for their services should be taken literally. They might turn out to be some wannabe serial killer who's yet to find their way to Skin Street. For each freelancer trying to do a tough job in a tougher place, there are a dozen or so Mengels who want to try out their toys on somebody too injured to fight back. Stick with your tribe surgeon if you're lucky enough to have one. Failing that, learn to patch up your own wounds. Trust me, if you're able to read, you've already got the intellectual advantage over a lot of Hell's residents. Universal education is pretty recent. Freelancers aren't worth the risk. Cambions. I'll be honest with you here. I don't know if Cambions actually exist. What I'm going to tell you is something that somebody else told me. It's up to you to decide if that's true or not. Personally, I really fucking hope it isn't. People rape one another in hell. It happens a lot. If you're not strong enough, it'll happen to you. The good news for the ladies out there is that damned men fire blanks. You'll almost never be impregnated. Now, I say almost never, because if you believe the stories, there's an incredibly slim chance that a couple of those little swimmers will be awake and looking for an egg. Just to put this into perspective, we're talking conjoined twins level of unlikeliness here, and that's just conception. The chances of a pregnant woman surviving the full 9 months in hell are probably conjoined triplets level of unlikely. You're talking about the perfect storm of beating the odds here. But this is eternity. A monkey randomly smashing keys on a typewriter will eventually produce the complete works of Shakespeare if it goes on for an eternity. The results of that perfect storm, of those monkeys with the typewriters, is a Cambion. A child conceived and born in hell. I'm not saying they exist, okay? I'm just saying I've met somebody who swears it's true and that he's seen a Cambion for himself. You see babies in their birthing sacks from time to time. Usually it's just a body. Occasionally, you see one drowning. Most of the time, damned ignore them. They wouldn't survive a day on the streets even if you could afford to devote your full attention to them. Better to leave them be. It's only the really fucked up people who cut through the sacks and... yeah, I'm not going to finish that thought. I'm getting a little sidetracked. So, this Cambion, who may or may not exist, apparently looked like a normal child. It cried, it shit, it sucked its mother's tits just like a regular baby would. The mother was part of a tribe and they'd been able to protect her throughout her pregnancy. Couldn't tell you why. Maybe curiosity, perhaps. When it was born, the whole tribe gathered around to have a look. Among them was the man who told me this story. Somebody I'd met years later and eventually would kill. This man cut the baby's cord and lifted it up to his face. Every man in the tribe had raped the mother at one point or another, and he wanted to see if the child looked anything like him. The Cambion looked like a normal child in every way but one. Its eyes were dead, lifeless, like a doll's. Sure, the Kit was alive. It wriggled and cried like a normal baby. Those eyes were wide open though, not scrunched closed like a newborn's eyes should be. Wide open, empty, doll's eyes. If that story is true, I don't blame the tribe for killing the child. Something like that should never exist. So with that, I'm done, and I have to go. This is the point where people like to have things nicely tied up. A few dragons slain, a few maidens served. At the very least, you could expect some kind of moral lesson to think over. I think that, in this case, that sort of thing is missing the point. There are no dragons to slay, no morals to learn. We do not live happily ever after. There's no grand revelation, no clever twist, no purpose, no redemption, no hope. There's only eternity among our own kind. Well, hey, it's been a long time. The last body I had in the living world didn't cope too well with my mind driving it. It's sometimes hard to remember that the lessons you learn in hell aren't a good fit for the civilized world. When murder is just a normal part of existence, you tend to keep doing it out of habit. The inevitable result is either death or exorcism, and a trip back to the city of Dis. Safe to say, I got a bit carried away the last time that I was here. After my last taste of freedom, I knew that I had to get back out of Dis. My existence ever since I squandered my last host has been utterly dedicated to finding my way back into a pillar of fire. I had to escape Dis. After what I've seen, I had to escape. This new body seems a little bit more durable than the last one. Now that I'm back, shall we take another trip to hell? Phlegethon Swamp. It rains in hell. It rains all the fucking time, and the waters have to go somewhere. Most of it drains into Gehenna, where it sinks into the otherworldly ash and apparently disappears. The rest flows either into the sewers beneath the city or it collects into Phlegethon Swamp. Remember how it is a bad idea to drink the rainwater in hell without boiling it? Well, the swamp water will kill you no matter what you do with it. Even letting the stuff touch your skin can be deadly. You see, the swamp isn't just filled with disease and rot. It's also brimming with chemical waste. One pool might simply be undrinkable, but another might dissolve your flesh. If you're mad enough to travel to Phlegethon, or unlikely enough to be born there, your odds of survival are slim. Phlegethon's waters are inky black, and it's impossible to tell just how deep the pool is by looking. It could be an inch or it could be a mile. You never know whether or not your next footfall will plunge you into the cloying abyss. Worse still, there are places where the sewers gradually drain the water and create unseen vortices capable of dragging down even the strongest of the damned. To navigate the swamp, you're better off using the crumbled buildings as stepping stones. The corrosive water causes wooden supports to wither and collapse, so there's plenty of debris lying around to stand on. Even so, if you take it slow and keep your balance, it's easy to slip and subject yourself to a fucking agonizing death. Last but not least are the wildfires. These are the reason that even the most insane tribes don't even try to establish a permanent stronghold in Phlegethon Swamp. All that chemical waste and decaying matter makes the swamp extremely volatile. A lightning strike or buildup of gases can result in an immense explosion that ignites Phlegethon's surface for miles around. Wildfires move fast. I guarantee that you won't outrun one. Cocytus. The first time that you see Cocytus, you could be forgiven for thinking you'd reached the very edge of Dis. The pit is dozens of miles wide and several times as deep. At some point in the dim and distant past, a fragile alliance of tribes put their slaves to work digging a quarry. Why they did this is lost to time, but many believe it was an attempt to escape Dis. Perhaps those tribes hoped that if they dug far enough, they'd eventually tunnel their way out of hell. In my view, the more likely answer is that those tribes were looking for resources. If that's true, then the evacuation was a success. Miles below the surface, beneath the rock and dirt, there are caverns filled with veins of iron and copper. So far underground and sheltered from the relentless fucking rain, it's far easier to create a fire hot enough to smelt ore. The value of such a position wasn't lost on the tribes, and that alliance soon showed just how brittle it was. After a short but savage burst of treachery, the initial shelters of Cocytus all but wiped themselves out. Since then, the pit has been settled and mined countless times. Coordinated efforts from various tribes have transformed the quarry into an abyss. So far, these alliances have always been broken sooner or later. Cocytus has many paths into its depths, and the lower you go, the more labyrinth the pit becomes. The sprawling caverns shelter entire shanty towns and crude smelting facilities. Some are abandoned, others have been lost to cave-ins. Yet there are still plenty of tribes who fight, join forces, and betray each other over the precious ore veins. By this point, you have to go pretty fucking deep to find an untapped vein, and this is where Cocytus becomes truly deadly. Anybody who thought they might be able to tunnel out of hell would be sorely disappointed once they learn what lies in the depths. In all these years, after digging for so many miles, not one person has run into some magical portal leading out of Dis. They also haven't run into magma for the matter. Instead, the deeper you go, the colder Cocytus becomes. I've never been to the very bottom myself. I'm told that down there, the air is cold enough to freeze your blood and shatter your skin. Maybe that's true. I could certainly believe it. On the rare occasion I've seen Cocytus, I've also had to turn back once the walls became more ice than rock, and the narrow walkway became a death trap. If you have the numbers to do it, Cocytus is still a valuable place to settle. Just remember that when hunger, cold, and greed are your constant companions, none of the damned can be trusted. The Pale Witch. I've told you about the Slaughterman previously, but hell has other legendary figures, each with their own sobriquets. The Ripper, the Grim Doctor, the Tyrant, and many more. So far, I've only encountered one of these figures. During my last stay in hell, I came across the Pale Witch. As is always the case with legends, the truth about the Pale Witch tends to get lost amid superstition. I've heard plenty of theories as to what she is. The Pale Witch is a Striga who has the power of the evil eye. The Pale Witch is a Gorgon whose gaze turns her victims to stone. The Pale Witch is a succubus who entraps the minds of those she wishes to consume. All of that is bullshit. I've seen the Pale Witch, and I know the truth about her. When I first saw her, I didn't realize who I was looking at. She was naked and locked in combat with an armed resident, so I took her for fresh meat. Here's a tip for you. If you see a resident fighting fresh meat, kill both of them while they're distracted. I planned to do exactly that, but something about the fight seemed off. Residents usually have the upper hand in a fight against fresh meat, and this particular bout definitely seemed about as one-sided as it gets. She was naked, whereas he was clad in leather and bone. She was unarmed, whereas he had a club. She was a wayfish, whereas he was huge. Despite him having the advantage, the resident was clearly terrified of her. The rules of hell dictated that he should have cracked her skull, taken her skin, and eaten her flesh, but that just wasn't happening. He was uncoordinated and apparently desperate to escape. Every swing he took was clumsy, and the blows he did manage to land on her didn't seem to have any effect. I could only stare at this naked, vulnerable woman that took the resident's club from his unresisted hand and swung it on his knee. I'm accustomed to the sound of bones breaking by now, but this time the noise caught me off guard. How the fuck was this happening? She brought the club down on the other knee, then his elbows, then his ankles, and then his shoulders. She left him broken and screaming on the floor. She could have finished him off with a blow to the head, stolen his clothes, and taken her rightful place as a resident. That's how hell works. These are the rules I've learned through bloody trial and error. That isn't what happened. Rather than kill him, she sat down beside him in the mud and took his hands in hers. I actually thought that she was going to console him. Instead, she started breaking his fingers, one by one. She snapped the fingers on both his hands with a calmness that made no sense to me. Torture is common in hell, but there's also a purpose behind it. The people in Skin Street do it out of sadism, and the people in the Boneyard do it for their insane purification rituals. This woman did it without emotion and without reason. I honestly don't know if she even understood that she was hurting him. I don't think her mind works the same way as ours. Eventually, the resident lost consciousness. A man can only take so much pain before the shock gets to him. Surely now she'd be satisfied, right? Surely she'd take his clothes and restore hell's order. No. She stood up, tilted her head slightly, and uttered a noise for the first time. It wasn't a victory cry, nor was it even a sigh of relief. Instead, the sound that she made was nothing more than a faintly bemused It was as if she couldn't comprehend why her plaything had stopped moving. She stood up and stepped away from him, apparently content to leave him alive. Unconscious and crippled on the ground, she kept his club but didn't take his clothing. The cold and the rain didn't seem to bother her. And then she looked at me. In that instant, I knew I was looking at the pale witch. I looked into her eyes and I couldn't fucking move. I understood what she was straight away, and the sheer terror of it froze me. The pale witch isn't a Striga. She isn't a Gorgon, and she isn't a succubus. The pale witch is a Cambion. It's hard to put into words exactly how paralyzing the sight of a Cambion is. That perfectly serene face and those dead, staring eyes just don't belong on a body that's otherwise human. It was like looking into the face of a mannequin and knowing that it's looking back at you. That noise again. That kind of detached curiosity shouldn't exist in the world of predator and prey. Might makes right. Survival of the fittest. Nobody in the city of Dis has any right to make that noise. She took an awkward step towards me, and I saw that her right leg was broken. It seemed that her fight with the resident had injured her after all. She just didn't notice. She tried to walk normally, completely unaware that one of her legs had an extra joint. I don't care how tough you are. Nobody should be able to put their full weight onto a broken leg without even wincing. She stepped closer, her zombie shuffle steadily closing the gap between us as I stared at her. She raised her club, and my survival instincts finally kicked into gear. Her transfixing spell broke just enough for me to stumble backwards and avoid her swing. And I ran. I ran from a woman with a broken leg, and I'm not even ashamed of it. Looking back at my experience, there are some things I just can't comprehend. The Pale Witch is a Cambion. I'm certain of it. She was born in hell, and hell is all she has ever known. She also looked to be about 30 years old. That just shouldn't be possible. No baby survives in Dis. Even if they had a tribe to protect them, there just isn't enough nourishment for an infant to grow into a toddler, let alone an adult. Pale Witch is a walking impossibility. Her existence is a defiance of all reason. I would endure every torture the people of Skin Street and the Boneyard could conceive of if it meant that I never ever had to look into her eyes again.
That was How to Survive in Hell by David Crabtree. Brought to life by Jay of Horror on the Rocks.
This one was intense. The raw depiction of hell as both a place and a state of mind is haunting. It's a reminder of the lengths that we go to survive, even in the worst circumstances.
It's a powerful story. And paired with tonight's first tale, it really drives home the theme of consequences, both personal and eternal. Jay, it's been a pleasure having you join us tonight. It was actually one of our listeners who tipped us off to you. Shout out Amanda Brand. She gets a lot of shout outs on here. What's one more? But before we wrap up, remind our listeners where they can find you.
Of course, you can find Horror on the Rocks on YouTube, Reddit, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else quality podcasts can be found. I'm also available on Twitter and Instagram, so feel free to connect with me there. I can't wait to meet everyone.
You heard him, everybody. Be sure to check out Horror on the Rocks. And don't forget to tune in tomorrow for Jay's narration of The Goodness Room. When you do, leave a comment letting him know Geoff and the team here at Chilling Tales sent you. It would mean a lot to us. And don't forget, you can support Chilling Tales for Dark Nights by leaving us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening. If you're watching on YouTube, give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and hit subscribe so you don't miss future releases. And if you want more, visit chillingtalesfordarknights.com to become a patron and enjoy our content ad-free. Your support keeps the nightmares alive. I'm Geoff Sturtevant, and it's been my pleasure to guide you through tonight's terrifying tales. Don't forget, we'll be welcoming a new guest narrator each Wednesday. So stay tuned for next week's surprise guest, where they and we will once again turn off the lights and turn on the dark.
Sweet dreams, listeners. Sweet dreams.